Elsewhere, Bahraini protesters have taken to the streets again to push for their demands for the overthrow of the ruling Al Khalifa regime. The new demonstrations were held to mark a year since a teenage protester was shot dead by Manama forces. The 14-year-old Ali Jawad al-Sheikh was killed in a mosque while attending religious ceremonies on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, which marks the end of the fasting month of Ramadan. Protesters called on authorities to release all prisoners jailed over such rallies. Bahrain has been gripped by pro-democracy protests since 2011. Regime forces have imprisoned thousands of people for taking part in demonstrations over the past years. The crackdown has also left scores of people dead. To discuss that further, and I joined with Mr. Saeed Shehabi, who is with the Bahrain Freedom Movement, and he's joining us live now from London. Now, Mr. Shehabi, the Bahraini government seems to be trying to do everything it can to stop these protests, continuing protests. We've heard recently about Mariam al-Khawaja and how she was treated at Manama Airport. We've also heard about citizenship being granted to foreigners. How do you see and why do you see that this revolution persists, though, at this time?
Thank you very much. It is clear that the people have not given up on their demands. They want to be free from hereditary dictatorship of the Al Khalifa. They want to write their own constitution, to determine their own destiny. They have basic rights, and they are not talking about sectarian issues at all. What they want is a political system based on one man, one vote. But the regime does not want that, and this is why it continues to detain human rights activists. And as you and your listeners are well aware, Mr. Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja has been on hunger strike for the past 8 days. And when his daughter went back to Bahrain to be with her family at this difficult time, she was swiftly arrested at the airport and charged with humiliating or talking about criticizing the king himself. So this shows you that Bahrain is not ruled by the rule of law, but by a tyrannical regime that needs to change.
And how do you feel about the international response, or the lack of, Mr. Shehabi? Because, the U.S. claims that it wants to spread democracy, but it's not saying much about Bahrain. And secondly, we have the regional countries such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia supporting the Bahraini forces and what they're doing against their own people.
Unfortunately, today we have what we call the counter-revolution made up of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Israel, and others. And these forces are continuing to attack the Arab people in everywhere, in Egypt, in Syria, in Iraq, in Tunisia. These forces are trying to stop any emergence of real democracy or real power of the people. And for Bahrain itself, it is clear how these forces, these countries, and also the United States, the United Kingdom, they are all in the same stand. They are defending the regime. They are giving deaf ear to the calls for human rights respect and also for democracy. Unfortunately, this double standard by the West, which is on the one hand claiming to promote democracy and the human rights in the world, but on the other hand declining to listen to the voices of reason and voices of democracy in Bahrain. This is why the people are not going to stop at any cost, because the alternative for their movement is to allow this dictatorial regime to continue its atrocities against the people. I believe that the time for the United States especially, and also Britain, which is defending the ruling family relentlessly, to change their attitude. And they should know that if they don't do that, then the alternative is to have these ISIS and other militants which are targeting all the people in the region and also in the world at large.
And finally, Mr. Shehabi, we just have under a minute left. I want to ask, though, all these regimes that are supporting the Bahraini monarchy have a lot of money and a lot of resources at their fingertips. How much of an influence does that have, then, on the fact that, these people on the streets of Bahrain are lay people, are the common people?
Look, my friend, I am really upset and disgusted by the fact that big countries, large countries like the United States, like Britain, are being silenced by money. Because the Saudis have money, have nothing but money, because the United Arab Emirates have nothing but money, which they are investing in London. Because of that, these people are compromising their principles, or the so-called principles, for the sake of obtaining a billion here and a billion there, for the sake of signing huge military contracts. For what? Just to silence the people who are calling for democracy. I believe the Western countries today are working against their own interests by promoting the dictatorship, the despotism and tyranny in the Middle East. And unless they change that, they will themselves be at the receiving end of the terrorist threat which is emanating from those countries which were denied the right to have democracy and respect over human rights.
Okay, we'll leave it there, but of course, as always, we appreciate you speaking to us. That was Saeed Shehabi speaking to us live from London.